I don't think I had watched any typical reality TV show in the last decade, but in my first couple weeks postpartum, I managed to binge watch 2 seasons of Love is Blind, The Ultimatum, and the last season of Love Island USA. Being extremely exhausted and sleep deprived, I was hoping to find some entertainment value out of them and not to have to flex my neurons too much, a low brain power activity of sort. Unfortunately, it seems like I wasn't able to take my critical thinking cap off, and I ended up watching all of it through a more analytical lens than I anticipated, which is what led me to create this video today. These shows managed to spark more thoughts than I would have previously given them credit for. In today's video, I want to explore the concept of soulmates, or being the one, being meant to be. Then I want to dive into the ideas of marriage and finding love, and see how most modern dating shows, like the ones mentioned earlier, may be poor attempts at portraying those concepts. Finally, I want to briefly touch on weddings, as they are society's ultimate effort at representing a celebration of love. So first, let's unpack the concept of the one. Before we get started, I want to preface this by saying that I will be exploring today's ideas from a predominantly heteronormative Judeo-Christian standpoint, as this is the kind of love typically portrayed in Western media. Although I would assume there are some overlap in LGBTQ+ relationships and relationships in other cultures as well. So about soulmates. For context, I consider myself agnostic, so I'm not certain if I believe in soulmates in the first place. A part of me romanticizes the idea that me and my husband were meant to be and 100% made for each other by the universe or God. But another part of me questions this idea as well. Soulmate mythology actually has several different origins across history and cultures. One particular popular one was popularized by Greek philosopher Plato, who argued that humans originally had 2 faces, 4 arms, and 4 legs, but Zeus split them in half as punishment for their pride. This left humans destined to spend their lives searching for their other halves. Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, and Christianity all have their own version of such a concept of 2 people being meant to be. One of the tenets of Hindu culture is that one shares a karmic connection with certain souls, a person they will cross paths with and share moments that will positively impact them both. In Buddhism, a person is reborn over and over again, and the people that surrounds them are often the same people in each life, creating this feeling of already knowing each other. Jewish people believe in the idea of distant partner, also called Bachelorette. And finally, in the Bible, Adam and Eve and countless other couples were created by God for one another, supporting the idea that God has a particular partner in mind for each person he created. According to a recent survey, over 60% to nearly 80% of US adults believe in soulmate. I don't believe it's necessarily our fault for believing in these types of things though, when that's all we see in movies and hear in love songs. Relationships have always been romanticized in media, depicting seemingly perfect couples with virtually no major problem at all. On the off chance a TV show or movie portrays more relatable struggles, they are often short-term, easy to solve, and almost never things that need to be worked on constantly, as is the case in most people's real-life relationships. While originally movies and TV shows did attempt to portray real relationships, over time, what sociologist, philosopher, and cultural theorist Jean Baudrillard called hyperreality replaced the initial reality they were getting their inspiration from. With hyperreality, the media that was originally imitating reality becomes more real than reality itself. Subsequently, as the public interacts with this first copy of reality, copies of this copy begin to circulate, and over time copies of copies are made until the reference to the original medium is essentially lost. Then the imaginary begins to dictate what we expect of our reality. For instance, most of us admire and dream of relationships that emulate the ones we see in these OTPs or one true pairings depicted in our favorite media. We all want the endless devotion Ali and Noah have in The Notebook, the passion of Jack and Rose in Titanic, the effortlessness of Lily and Marshall's relationship in How I Met Your Mother, or the spark of Meredith and Derek in Grey's Anatomy. It's important to note that while it's okay to want those things, we should never be blinded by the idea of finding the one to justify abuse. If a relationship is abusive or lying and cheating is common occurrence, believing that one is with their soulmate can prevent them from leaving a toxic situation and have terrible consequences. Idolizing marriages and relationships can also easily send us down an unhealthy path of comparison and can often ruin a good thing. A great relationship can become negatively impacted when the benchmark used to compare it to is artificial, whether that be people's display of their relationships on social media or the relationships depicted on TV. It's important to avoid doubting the relationship just because it doesn't look as perfect as we might imagine, again, as long as there are no legitimate red flags. Believing in soulmates can also let you overlook a potential good match if the person doesn't fit your preconceived idea of what your perfect man/woman would be. If they don't check off every box or appear to not meet the standards you have created for yourself, you could miss out on a potentially great match. While singleness provides you with a great opportunity to work on yourself and find what you want in a partner, it's important to remain open to various possibilities. Equally as important is to not rely on your relationship to fulfill you. As many inspirational sayings go, you should be enough for yourself and you shouldn't need someone to complete you. Seeking relationships in the hopes of finally feeling satisfied or happy is likely to have a negative impact on said relationship, as the pressure to keep someone happy should not solely fall onto a partner. In a world with nearly 8 billion people, it's hard to imagine having only one true match. Since our personal world are typically relatively small and we won't actually meet most of the other 8 billion people in the world, it would be far-fetched to assume that the one person you are truly meant to be with just happens to live in the same town as you or walk into your life at the perfect time for you two to meet and fall in love. I mean, if you do believe in God or the universe, then you could easily argue that it was all meant to be, but let's explore an alternative idea here. I do believe that a certain level of compatibility is necessary to have a successful relationship. I think that when you start a relationship with somebody, you enjoy each other's company, you get to know them, and when things go well, you start to build a life together. You grow with them and end up developing a deeper connection with them than with anyone else. In a sense, I think that rather than meeting the one, you become the one by growing together. There are probably many people in the world you would have a potential to grow with harmoniously. With any number of different life choices, you could have easily ended up somewhere completely different with someone else. Someone who may or may not be as good of a pairing that we cannot know. So perhaps the belief in soulmates is a sort of confirmation bias, a way for us to affirm that we made the right choice, that our lives are the best that they can be with the partner we have, maybe? Now, I know this makes me sound super jaded and cynical. I'm sure some of you wonder about my relationship at this point. I will be celebrating 6 years of marriages and 8 years of dating with my husband this year. We are incredibly happy and have just welcomed our second baby. We both love the lives we have built together and wouldn't trade them for the world. We have no regrets in our relationship choices, and we truly believe that we complete each other the most. Plus, I don't think anyone else could put up with my shit better than him, and vice versa. We are all we need to help each other be the best versions of our respective selves. As this BBC article explains, it seems that sometimes having a destiny-based mindset in regards to relationships can actually lead to dysfunctional patterns within a given relationship. An expectation that something will be instantly and everlastingly perfect only leads to disappointment and resentment because this simply isn't realistic, says Ruth McAuliffe, a counselor who works with many patients experiencing relationship struggles. Having a growth mindset in which both partners are willing to work and support one another is a lot more conducive to the long-term success of a relationship. Moving on to marriage, what some deem the ultimate benchmark of a successful relationship. I would like to draw a distinction between the legal premise surrounding marriage and the ideal of marriage. Unless you are religious and ascribe greater meaning to marriage, believing it is a commitment in front of God, a civil union, a marriage certificate issued by the local government is nothing more than a piece of paper. It's a legally binding document for administrative purposes, but has very little to do with the love a couple shares and their actual commitment to one another. My husband and I both believe that our commitment to each other has nothing to do with the piece of paper we signed, and that the administrativeness of it is completely separate from our feelings for each other. When people conflate the two, it can cause a lot of issues. Relationships should be strong regardless of the documents that attest their validity for civil purposes. Lots of dating shows' premises center around the goal of marriage. From The Bachelor and the Bachelorette to Love is Blind and The Ultimatum, contestants or participants in these shows all hope to make it to the finish line with a ring on their finger. Now, I will be honest, the idea of forcing people to rush into an engagement or a wedding for entertainment value is a bit ridiculous to me. I understand the general intention behind those shows. People sign up in hopes of finding a husband or wife. They are ready for commitment, ready for something serious, to find someone to share their lives with. I get it. There are over hookups and the general lack of commitment most relationships exhibit these days. But being given a very short deadline and a relatively small pool of potential mates and expecting to find someone perfect for them in X amount of weeks is just not how it usually works. While hosting one of these shows can be a good stepping stone to gather people looking for the same things, in this case, serious committed relationships, speeding up the entire dating process, or dare I say courting process, just isn't going to allow for strong relationship foundations to be formed. Now, I know there are a few success stories over the years, so clearly the process can work sometimes, but in most cases, it clearly appears to fail for the couples involved. Let's look at Love is Blind. Only 2 out of 6 couples from season 1 are still going strong after 2 or 3 years now. Season 2 had a similar outcome with 2 out of 5 couples making it to the reunion. In The Ultimatum, aside from the 2 couples that got engaged before the recoupling even happened, only 1 couple, Madeline and Colby, is actually married and expecting, apparently, and Shanique and Randall remain engaged. Both other couples didn't make it, as we were able to see in the finale and reunion episodes. Finally, according to a 2022 Women's Health Mag.com article, out of 26 seasons of The Bachelor and 18 seasons of The Bachelorette, only 16 couples remained together. 16 out of 44. That's actually about a third. It's not that bad. I'm actually genuinely shocked. Still, according to research, it is estimated that in America, 41% of all first marriages end in divorce, so the shows still have a lower odds than the real world. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that there is a certain level of artificiality to these dating show relationships. First, they are encouraged to perform their love for one another on the show in order to appear good on national TV. We know what kind of consequences being portrayed as a bad guy on these shows can be. They might also be consciously or subconsciously going along with the relationship in hopes of making it to the finale, where there can either be a grand prize or at least the prospect of a successful career on social media following the wrapping up of the show. I mean, in Love is Blind, if you don't match up, you basically get erased from the show and might not even get a single mention. So there is this pressure to keep up the performance of a good relationship. Ultimately, though, the accelerated timeline imposed on these couples really doesn't allow enough time to truly get into the dynamics of a relationship despite the show's best attempts. In a sense, in order for a relationship to successfully develop, you must go through certain steps. You may remember organizational behaviors, principles of forming, storming, norming, and performing from a high school or college psych course you took. This is a classic concept where in order to build an efficient team, members that just gather together need to go through conflict and friction to push against the established boundaries, resolve their differences, and develop respect and appreciation for one another to then finally operate at high performance as a group. Without the proper time and environment, couples cannot test their own boundaries and truly see if they will sink or swim in the face of adversity. They're stuck in the honeymoon phase. Couples need to be able to see if they can align their life goals, their current situations, their families, etc. What are they willing to give up? What are they willing to improve on for the sake of the relationship? Olivia Sun made a great video tackling the ideas of passive versus active love and how our conception of love often is a big detriment to our relationships. I will link it down below. The fact that all those shows culminate in weddings or proposals leave very little room for hesitation in a world where most people put a tremendous amount of value on this quote-unquote lifelong commitment. After all, if you see marriage as a commitment in front of God, it will hold a lot more meaning. The Ultimatum is the best example of this overvaluation of marriage. Because the couples have all been in happy enough, exclusive, committed relationships for a few years, why are they willing to sabotage it all, to question it, and put it on the line for the married title? Are you really willing to destroy everything you have built because of a piece of paper? how can this possibly be a deal breaker? TMR made a great video on the ultimatum and self-sabotage. You should check it out. On one hand, why is it so important for people who issue the ultimatum to be married? Will it really change anything? On the other hand, why is it so hard for the person being given the ultimatum to commit to signing a piece of paper if they say they are actually already emotionally committed to that person? I mean, the only valid reason I see is that hosting a wedding can be a huge expense, so I can see why a rational person would want to avoid that cost if they are not sufficiently financially secure. That brings me to our last point for today: weddings. Why are they so expensive? The perfect reality TV show to exemplify this is Netflix's new show, Marriage or Mortgage, where couples can either choose to spend their hard-earned savings on a down payment for a house or on the wedding of their dreams. A realtor and a wedding planner compete to gain the couple's confidence in where they should invest their money. Now, for most rational people, the choice will seem pretty clear. It's obvious that a house is a much better investment than a one-day event with no capital return. Somehow, though, they were able to cast enough couples that actually ended up choosing the wedding over the house. I think this is a strategic choice on the showrunner's part to garner some outrage and suspense, because a show where no one chooses the wedding would be too predictable and boring. The shocking twist, though, is that this seems to have been filmed right before the pandemic started, so many couples who chose the wedding options ended up having to alter their expectations due to COVID restrictions. Wedding sizes and costs have dramatically changed due to the pandemic. At the same time, the cost of housing has been rising, pricing out people wanting to get in on the market while accumulating capital for already homeowners. This does solidify the idea that clearly a home is a much better investment than a one-day celebration of a couple's love. Tiffany Ferg made an amazing video on the wedding industry that goes into lots of details on how weddings are essentially capitalist performances of patriarchal tradition and expensive displays of wealth. She highlighted that pre-pandemic, the average cost of weddings was about $30,000, with a median being closer to $20,000. That's a lot of money. Historically, weddings weren't always this extravagant. It was in the 1800s that the Victorian elite started to host grand events in celebration of marriage. After Queen Victoria's wedding was described in the press, upper-class couples started to embrace her wedding as a template, and traditions formed, including the wearing of a white dress, processional entrance, flowers and music, a carriage for the bride and groom, and a large wedding cake to share with the guests. New businesses exclusively dedicated to catering to the brides-to-be started to develop, and by the 19th century, middle-class women were also drawn to these glamorous parties, hoping to be able to experience a sense of royalty, even just for a day. This was the true beginning of the commercialization of love. Personally, my husband and I had a fairly inexpensive wedding when we were still in university and couldn't afford very much. We had a backyard wedding at his parents' house with a small party comprised of close friends and family. We had the Party City blow up palm trees and coconut cups to emulate a Hawaiian-themed wedding, and limbo and a piñata for wedding entertainment. My dress cost less than $60, and my husband got to wear shorts and flip-flops as his wedding attire. Our wedding looked more like an 8-year-old's birthday party than a wedding, but that suited us just fine. Overall, our budget was super small, and we had a great time, and I believe our guests did too. Alternatively, I think the only other kind of wedding I would have liked, aside from a courthouse wedding with no fluff at all, would have been a similar get-together with more sustainable choices, such as Shelby Zoll documented in her wedding video. In stark contrast, most people hope to have opulent weddings that appear elegant and tasteful. String quartets, large floral arrangements, beautiful centerpieces, and perfectly coordinated bridal parties are the norm. These big celebrations where you get to pretend to be a princess for one night are very nice in theory, but they shouldn't end up hurting you financially. If you can't afford it, you shouldn't do it. It is estimated that nearly 30% of couples go into debt to finance their wedding, and that doesn't account for couples who spend nearly all of their life savings for that one-day celebration with nothing left to build the rest of their lives afterwards. Some people are fortunate enough to have their weddings fully or partially paid for by their parents and families, or in the case of Chinese weddings, you may be able to get most of your investment back through monetary red pockets gifts given by the guests. In that case, having a fancy wedding may be slightly more justifiable, but if it negatively impacts a couple's finances, it should really be reconsidered. I'm extremely introverted, so I personally do not see the appeal in large celebrations. I personally wouldn't enjoy myself if I had to host a huge wedding. I would be too stressed by everything that would have to be coordinated. It would purely be a party for other people where me and my husband could barely spend any time together because we would be too busy performing and parading, taking pictures, greeting our respective guests. We wouldn't have any significant interactions all night. So I personally believe that even if we had the financial means to throw a huge fancy wedding, we would both rather use the money to go on the most extravagant honeymoon and travel in general. Can you imagine how many trips you could get for $30,000? How many weeks of experiences could you trade for the cost of that one night? Ultimately, I don't want to judge anyone's choice. I am merely trying to ask thought-provoking questions about the necessity of extravagant weddings. Aside from flexing the appearance of wealth and gathering lots of perfect pictures for your Instagram page, there is no reasons to have such an expensive celebration. While Rebecca Mead writes in her book One Perfect Day, The Selling of the American Wedding, a great set of wedding photographs can be called upon to justify all the expense that precedes them. The anticipation of acquiring a good set of photographs can also encourage that expense in the first place. It's important to remember that this is all just a large capitalistically performative endeavor. You can easily celebrate with all the people you love without spending the equivalent to the down payment of a house on the whole affair. Well, this was supposed to be a quick and easy one, but I ended up rambling and getting sucked into the rabbit hole a bit more than I anticipated. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. What do you think about marriage? Is it as serious as people think? Do you believe in soulmates? How do you feel about huge weddings? Thanks for watching. See you next time.